Hello, everyone. We are joined here today by two-time Conference Player of the Year and former All-American Brian Fogerty from Fontbonne University. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about the the all-decade team here for the SLIAC here in the 2000s. First of all, can you talk about your final 3 years there with the Griffins, winning conference titles, closing out your career with 3 straight titles?
Yeah, it was a pretty cool experience. My first year when we came in, it was kind of a changing of the guard at Fontbonne, where some of the older guys were on their way out, and we had a big group of freshmen that came in. So we got to play right away, which was nice. But we also, I think, won 5 or 6 games. So we struggled mightily, and we got better. We got more cohesive. We added some pieces here and there. And in our last 3 years, we had some real success. I think each year we really peaked at the right time. One year we started out real slow and then kind of had some up and downs, but each year right around conference tournament time was when we really started playing our best basketball, which was always fun. And then once we got into the tournament, we were able to close them all out with a lot of close games. But those are the ones that make it fun when everything's competitive and close and kind of down to the wire. So
now you mentioned it.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say real quick. You mentioned there about a young group that came in together and built up together, and I think that's something interesting with basketball nowadays. You see a lot of movement, right, between players. If they're not playing, they go to a different school. But do you think the ability that you guys were able to stick together and grow together as a team really helped you make those 3 straight titles?
Yeah, I do. And especially when you're young, as a young person, you don't sometimes know how to deal with adversity and working as a team with new faces from all around. When you're in high school, you grow up with a lot of those kids from the time you're in grade school. So being in college makes it especially difficult versus having all those experiences. So with us being able to come in and grow together and become just friends off the court as well. Last weekend I was in Chicago for a wedding of one of my former teammates. So, being able to do that and kind of build those relationships on and off the court really helped, I think helped our group succeed.
Yeah. We mentioned the 3 straight SLIAC titles that, of course, led to some national tournament appearances. Can you talk to tell everybody about what do you remember about those tournament runs?
Well, I remember our first one as a sophomore. We were a little disappointed. We ended up going right across the street to Wash U, which was great. I mean, they won, if I remember right, 2 titles in the 4 years I was here. So being able to play the national champions was pretty cool, and we played them tough. And then my senior year, we got beat up pretty bad up in the Chicago area. But then my sophomore year, or my junior year, we led the whole game. We're playing Mary Hardin Baylor out of Texas, and kind of a perennial powerhouse D3, and should have won the game. I mean, we had them down. We lost on a 30-footer at the buzzer, but just being in those games, and the biggest thing that I remember is once you made it to those games, you really felt like you were kind of in the big time, because you were traveling, you're staying in hotels, you're doing everything that the big dogs do. And you've got shoot-arounds, team meals, everything is very regimented, very scheduled, and very professional. So those were some cool experiences to be able to go through that.
Yeah. You got kind of a unique ability here. Obviously played in the SLIAC, but now Griffin fans and SLIAC fans see you on the sidelines too. How have you seen the conference change from your time as a player to then when you're an assistant coach with the Griffins?
I would say the biggest thing is, you touched on it earlier, is you do see a lot of new faces year to year, team to team. I mean, we've got our 6th man, who is a great player. He transferred from Webster. It just wasn't a good fit for him there, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of respect for Coach Bunch, so I don't think it was anything to do with him. Obviously, just sometimes you fit better in a different system. But that's one of the biggest things. You see a lot of new faces on teams, whether it's junior college transfers or outside of the conference transferring in, or whatever the case may be. And obviously the 3-point shot has taken a lot more. There's, just like basketball at all levels, there's really no mid-range anymore. It's either layups and dunks and threes. There's no kind of in between. Those would be the 2 biggest changes I've seen within the conference and the game.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, you were able to play for Coach Lee McKinney, who's well known throughout the conference, always well respected by everybody. Can you talk about what it was like, first of all, to play for Coach McKinney, and did that have any effect on you as far as going into coaching after your graduation?
It did, yeah, for sure. Coach McKinney, as everybody knows, he wasn't the biggest X's and O's guys, but he was just a hell of a person, a good recruiter, obviously, and just off the court would take care of you no matter what. I mean, I had my struggles as a young teenager coming into college, and he did nothing but take care of us. Not only myself, but everybody. He would just take care of you as a person, and he really cared about your growth outside of the game. And I've got two kids, and so being able to have them around the game and watching the other 20 kids that I quote unquote have at school, a lot of the life lessons that he taught me and a lot of our teammates, you just kind of use that in your time as a coach, and develop not only on the court, but develop your players off the court.
Couple more questions for you. We talked about the SLIAC titles, the national tournament appearances. Are there any other memories for you when you look back and that come up and pop up in your mind?
Oh yeah, yeah. The two biggest things I would say would be, one, every year, and the last couple of years we haven't done it with our team because of the COVID situation, but we're supposed to do it again this year, and we did it my first year coaching. Is we took a big trip every kind of around the Christmas time over that break in the season. You go down Florida. I got to go to Hawaii twice, which was cool. But just building your bond with your teammates. I didn't really realize it until I started coaching and seeing the players kind of in an isolated environment where it's just them. So the team bonding that those trips bring is a pretty cool thing, and it really helps, I think, team chemistry. So that looking back for me was a big portion of it. And the other thing is I met my wife in college. I used to make her come rebound for me. So we've been together, quite a long time now. So, and she played on the women's team. So just being able to travel with the women, and she got to watch me play and all that. So those are two pretty cool experiences.
Well, as good of a scorer you were, I'm sure she wasn't grabbing too many rebounds, right?
Well, as long as she stood under the basket, that was all
right. Final question for you. I sent over the all-decade list for you to look at. Are there any players on there that, you kind of remember going up against and looking forward to competing against, or anything like that?
Yeah, you mentioned Mike. He was a big time competitor. I remember when we played. I don't know if he ever played with Chris Tarpley out of Eureka or not, but I noticed his name on there. I remember him being a very good player. And when he graduated, we thought maybe we had a little bit of a break, and then Zasada came in, and he was just as good of a player. So, but then one name that stood out on there was Stephen Bash. Him and I went to the same high school. Okay. So that was pretty cool to see. We never played together in high school. I want to say he was a senior in high school when I was in 8th grade.
Sure.
But then I think he had a medical red shirt in there somewhere. So we got to play against each other in college, and I know his sisters and his mom and dad, and I just know his whole family decently well. So that was pretty cool to see. And then Scott Spinner, he coached me for a year as a grad assistant, and so that was pretty cool to see him make it. And he's very good. And I even played some pickup basketball here and there with Darren Hoggett around town. So
okay, cool. Yeah, it's kind of neat how everybody kind of, like you said, from following footsteps in high school and then playing summer pickup games, and it's kind of neat how everybody's that little bit of atmosphere was all kind of linked together. So
yeah, and I can't even believe I forgot to mention him, Alfonso Ellis. I mean, him and I battled in college a lot, and then we both went on to play some semi-professional basketball for a while there for a little bit, and I got a really good picture of me guarding him. He was playing for a team out of Chicago, and got a really good picture in my office at work of me guarding him. And then he went on to even play. He just got done playing. He was playing all over the world. So pretty cool to see that.
Very cool. Final question for you. Catch everybody up what you've been up to since graduation.
Oh, just working. I'm working sales, so I got a lot of free time, which is nice. So which allows me to coach and raising my kids, and that's really about it. Playing a little golf here and there. That's about all I do.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us, Brian. Hit the golf course. Hopefully we'll get some nice weather out on the links this summer, so you can get out there. So thanks again. I really enjoyed looking back here on the all-decade team with you, and thanks for joining us.
All right. Appreciate the time. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today, everyone. We are here with Michael Zasada, a three-time all-conference player, ranking in the top 10 in Eureka College basketball history in both scoring and rebounding. We're here to talk about SLIAC men's basketball during the 2000s. Thank you for joining us today, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It's kind of interesting. You were part of the first class at Eureka as they moved into joining the SLIAC conference. What do you remember about entering college, kind of with a clean slate for an athletics program where you get a chance to kind of write your own story?
Yeah. So it was kind of frustrating for me growing up in the suburbs because Eureka was in the NIC. So all the schools were close up in the suburbs that way. So my parents were upset when I decided to go to Eureka, and then they say, hey, the closest drive is now a home game at 2.5 hours, and away games are 5 hours down to St. Louis. So it was a little frustrating in that sense, but in terms of just looking at what Eureka had, and they had struggled a little bit in the NIC, but they had good pieces coming back, and then joining a new conference where nobody really knew anything about us, we knew we had an opportunity to do something and kind of fly under the radar for the most part, since a lot of those teams never played us before.
Right. Yeah. What are some of the memories you have during your time at Eureka?
One, from my freshman year, I worked my way into the starting lineup about halfway through the season, but we were down at Fontbonne, and they were really good then. They ended up beating us actually in the SLIAC championship my freshman year in overtime. But we were at their place, and we were down one with, I think, like 2.1 seconds left. And our big guy, AJ Richard, Chris Tarpley threw a Hail Mary pass to AJ Richard. He caught it short corner and hit a fadeaway as the buzzer expired. And I remember coming off the bench and just going nuts. So that was one of my best memories from my freshman year. And then going forward after that, making the conference tournament my senior year, playing in the conference championship again. Westminster ended up getting us that year by, I think it was 7 in regulation. We just never seemed to play well at Westminster. I don't know if it's the church windows that they got in that gym or what.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that about your, talents in both scoring and rebounding. Yeah. You were just the second player at the moment in conference history, and still to this day, only the third player in conference history to lead the league in both scoring and rebounding in the same season. Every player wants to score, but kind of not everybody always wants to, get a little dirty and get inside and rebound. What made you such a good rebounder, and why was that a part of your game?
I went to a high school of actually 2,500 kids, and believe it or not, me at 6'5", I was the tallest kid on the basketball team. So I had to rebound in high school because we were short, and playing against a lot of the bigger schools up in the suburbs, they had guys that were always 6'7", 6'8", at least one or two of them on their team. So I'll never forget this, though. I owe a little bit of it to my high school coach. He was big on toughness, and he was new my junior year when he came in. I was new head coach, so everybody was on a clean slate. And I remember I hurt my back one day at practice. So I'm sitting there and I'm holding my back, and we get ready to do war rebounding, which is like 4-on-4, 4 guys in the paint, 4 guys outside. And I'm holding my back as we go to that rebounding drill. And my head coach takes a folding chair and plants it at half court and goes, "Hey, Z, why don't you go sit over here? This drill's too tough for you." So after that, I never complained about my back again. And it gave me a little bit of an edge of, okay, like somebody's got to be tough, and toughness sets the tone. So from that point forward, I just stuck my nose in all the time. Didn't matter if it was I was shooting it, somebody else was shooting it. And I had a pretty good knack. I don't know if you watched the Bulls documentary when Rodman's talking about understanding which way a ball's coming off. Like I actually paid attention to that, and he's got a lot of truth to it, where you can kind of get a read based on who's shooting and which way they miss typically. So kind of being a student of the game in that way. And then just, I wanted to score. So if I wasn't the one shooting it, I want to go get a rebound, and I want to put it back in and score. That's easy, 4, 6, 8 points a game. So
right. Now next couple of questions are going to be about the all-decade team. The list here of the players. Yeah. I actually spoke with Brian Fogerty from Fontbonne earlier, and he actually mentioned your name, and
great player.
He actually mentioned Tarpley as well, one of your teammates. So what do you remember going against Fogerty?
Man, he was a load. I feel like coming in as a freshman, he was a year older than I was as a sophomore. And I felt like that entire Fontbonne team, they were lumberjacks. Like the strength that those guys had, it was unbelievable. And Brian was a great player. I want to say he averaged double-double almost for his career. 2-time conference player of the year, I think 3-time all conference. And they were tough. So it was always fun playing those guys. He was a really clean player and whatnot, like not dirty or anything like that. Really not a whole lot of trash talking on his end, but you knew when you stepped on the floor with him that he was a presence and you had to bring your game. Otherwise he was going to eat you up.
He mentioned one of your, former teammates, and you mentioned him earlier with the inbounds pass, Tarpley. Can you tell people, remind them about Tarpley?
So the funny story about Tarpley, he went to a school up here called Pekin High School. It's a big school. I think it's about 3,000 kids. He did not play high school basketball. So he went to school at Pekin with my freshman year, the assistant coach was Ben Mooney. Tarpley was over at Culver Stockton or something like that, and walked onto the team and played well. So Mooney convinced him to transfer to Eureka. So the year before I got there, he transferred in that semester and averaged like 14 and 10 in the NIC in 10 games or whatever.
Right.
And he's just barely scratching the surface of what he could be. And then his senior year, my freshman year, he was conference player of the year.
Right.
I mean, he could shoot it inside, outside, didn't matter. And then he was also actually a really good singer. So he would go out and sing the national anthem before games. And I know guys in other team are like looking at it, like, what is this guy doing singing the national anthem? Well, then he goes and puts 25 and 20 on you. And you're like, oh, okay, he can sing the national anthem, man, play ball.
Wow. Talk. That's an interesting story. I don't think I've ever heard of that from playing no high school basketball to a player of the year and national anthem singer.
Yep.
So. Are there any other players as you look at this list that you remember, enjoyed competing against or playing with, or any memories that kind of stick out to you as you look back?
The two guys from Webster that I played, Scott Spinner and Hoggett, they were both very, very good. I felt like Hoggett was a grown man when I came in because he was like, I think a junior and then a senior as a sophomore. So going against him was always super tough. It was always fun playing against Fonz. I think him and I had a little bit of a rivalry. And I remember I'll never forget, I was at the free throw line at their place. I think I had 31 or something that game. But when I was a freshman, we were there. And Tarpley actually goes for a dunk with like 8 seconds left. We're down 2. They bust his head open. He can't shoot free throws. So I'm sitting on the bench at the time. Coach goes, Z, go shoot him. So I shoot. I missed the first one. I missed the second one. Luckily, Matt McComb comes in, grabs a rebound, puts it back in. We ended up beating him in overtime. So I owe my point guard, Matt McComb, one for that one. But then always later in the years, as I went on my sophomore, junior, senior year, whenever I'd be there, Fonz would always bring that up. Like, hey, Z, give me one. You know you're good at missing a free throw here. So He was always a character. And I know he went over to Japan, I think, for a little while, played ball professionally. And it was cool talking to his dad. His dad was a really cool guy when he came to the game. So
yeah, he never let you live that down, huh? Those two.
No, every time I saw him.
My final question for you: catch everybody up. What you've been up to since graduating from Eureka?
Sure. So I actually ended up marrying Eureka Red Devil, Nicole Fisher at the time. She's right there, going with the baby.
There she is.
She was SLIAC Player of the Year her senior year. I think 2-time All Conference, and then she was All Conference the NIC her sophomore year. And then so we moved down to Canton. I had a couple different jobs. I work for the hospital in town right now for the finance department, but I actually coach high school basketball here at Canton. I was a varsity assistant for 4 years, and I've coached the JV team the last 2 years. So it's nice giving back. We have a daughter who's 6, and then the little guy is 6 weeks old. So
nice. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to ask one more question then. Why did you want to go back into coaching or go into coaching?
I didn't really want to at first. I worked out some guys and stuff back when I was still living at home and when I first moved down here. And then there was a couple kids that I was working out, and it was just nice giving back. And we had a new head coach come into Canton 6 years ago when I started. His name was Hunter Rhodes, actually. He played Division I over at Northern Iowa. Heck of a ball player. And I knew his dad, and his dad's like, hey, do you want to help? So I was like, sure. My thought was I'd volunteer a couple days a week here and there. And then once I started volunteering, I was like, just got hooked on the kids. And it was nice being back in the gym, and I'm able to just sort of pass on the gifts that I was given and the people that mentored me onto the next generation of guys. And I've built relationships with kids now that have graduated the last 4 years that still talk to a bunch of them all the time. They're grown up now and they can go out and have a beer with coach, which I think is cool. So It's just nice being around the game, and then just the relationships that you get to continue to develop and hopefully teach a couple of life lessons along the way.
Well, that's great to hear that you are giving back to the game. Hopefully you don't have to set a chair out at midcourt for your players too often, but thank you again for joining us today. Really enjoyed taking a walk back down memory court, I guess. So
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys, and I'm honored to be on the all decade team. That's awesome.
all right, take care.
Yep. Have a good one.